Shalom, everyone. Page 27 in Bava Batra is ending the chapter of Lo Yachfor. And it's ending with reminding us a rule which is I believe to be a big chidush in the life of communities. And the idea of Reshut HaYachid and Reshut HaRabim, we already saw it in Shabbat, but in the connection to Bava Batra, it has to do with understanding that what I can do in my own private home is limited to the fact that if it's hurting other people, there's limits to that. But also that the public domain is the responsibility of everybody who lives at that area. And we cannot say that what's happening in the public domain is none of my concern. And that is bringing us into a really beautiful and deep understanding throughout the Talmud that no one lives by himself. And as the beautiful song, no one is an island. In other words, if I think that I don't care what's happening outside of my private domain, I should know that one day it's going to come back and, God forbid, hurt me. And I'm sharing the sources, and let's see what we have what we have here. So the sentence, the phrase in page 27 in Bava Batra is saying that with regard to a tree that extends into a public domain, one cuts its branch so that a camel can pass beneath the tree with its rider sitting on it. In other words, true, the tree is in my private property, but if the leaves are extended outside to the public domain and people cannot pass by, even a high person sitting on a high camel. If it disturbs that rider, then I need to take responsibility and cut the branches. And that idea that appears, as I said before, at the end of Perek Lo Yachfor, we found the same idea at the end of the Perek. We'll start now the next Perek, Chizkat HaBatim, and again the whole understanding of how people interact with each other financially and personally, and being partners and being neighbors, is understanding the limits of what I can do in my property and what I can do outside of my property. And the story at the end of Chizkat HaBatim in page Samech is saying a similar statement, saying in terms of a tree, Rabbi Yanai Havale Ilan, that Rabbi Yanai had a tree that was leaning into the public domain, and there was a certain man who also had a tree that was leaning into the public domain, and the general public was preventing him from leaving it there, and people asked that person to cut the leaves. So the story goes on to say that before people came to Rabbi Yanai to tell that person to cut off the branches, Rabbi Yanai cut his own branches, and then he told that person to cut the branches. And when the students came to Rabbi Yanai and said, like, why did you wait, or why did you do it now? His answer was, quoting Reish Lakish, that says, because of the statement of Reish Lakish, who said, adorn yourself and afterwards adorned others. And the verse in the Aramaic and the Hebrew, kshot atzmecha v'achar kach kshot acherim, adorn yourself and afterwards adorned other. In other words, act properly before requesting others to do so. And I think that rule is a basic rule in living in a community, and living in a city, and living in a country, or even just in one's neighborhood. What I want everyone to behave like, I need to be the first one to do it, to act like it. And I cannot demand people to act in a certain way if I don't do the same. In other words, if I want my neighbors to be quiet after a certain time, I cannot, make noise at that time. So the whole idea of Reshut HaRabim, the public domain, as we saw in both pages, is telling us that the human responsibility to others is critical. And if I'd like something to happen, I need to be the first one to do it. And the other thing is that the public domain is ours, and we need to take responsibility on what's happening there. And and I'm just wanted to remind us that the Gemara in Shabbat, and is saying it in a proper way, that it's quoting the Tosefta, that four domains for the halacha of Shabbat, again, the private domain, the public domain, the Carmelit, again, which is like neither the public domain or the private domain, and an exempt domain which does not fall into the categories of domain. In other words, Chachamim, Reshut Rabim, Reshut Yachid, Carmelit, V'Ptor. In other words, Chachamim are saying we need to understand the boundaries. We need to understand the distinctions between the different places where people live. Why is that so? Because what I do at home is not what I can do outside, and what I can do outside in the public domain is not what I can do in the gray area, etc. But the borders are crucial. The borders are crucial not only so I will know that this is mine and this is everybody's, but also the borders are important. So in the discussion in the Gemarot is also for us to understand that where my private property ends does not mean that I don't have anything to do with what's happening beyond the walls of my house. And the halakha definitely asks us and requests us to take care of what's happening outside of my private domain. And the beautiful example of we saw it already in Bava Kama, but I want just to go through it so we will understand how Chachamim understand that idea that the public domain is not just no man's land, and no one can say it has nothing to do with me. And the story goes of a person. The halacha says that the person should not throw stones from his property into the public domain, saying nobody cares. This is my brothers and me. I take them the stones from my field and I put it in the public domain. A person should not do that. And an incident occurred involving a certain individual who was throwing stones from his property into the public domain. And a certain pious man found him, and the latter said to him, Reika, can low life, for what reason are you throwing stones from property that is not yours into your property? In other words, that pious person is referring to that other person as not the smart person. And he's telling him something which is very peculiar, because that person takes from the private and put it in the public domain. And that pious person is saying, you're doing the opposite. You're taking stones from a place which is not yours, and you're putting it into your property. And that's why the man mocked him, as he did not understand what he meant, as the property from which he was throwing stone was his. I want to stop here and understand, because we already learned that, but I think what the Gemara is doing here is giving us the underlying theological understanding of Reshut Rabim and Reshut Yachid. Really, really, there's nothing that really belongs to me, which is really mine. The property is from God. What I have is from God. And I got it as a loan. I got it as a pikadon. And for people to start thinking that they owe property is a dangerous act of thinking that we can owe more and more and more in this world. But really, what we have is not really ours. And what's outside is that belongs to everybody. That's where we all share a part in the public domain. And really what happened later, some days later, he was forced to sell his field from which he had thrown the stones, and he was walking in the same public domain into which he had thrown them, and he stumbled on those same stones, and he said, that pious man said it well to me when he said, for what reason are you throwing stones from property that is not yours into your own property, since the property no longer belonged to me and only the public domain remains mine to use? There's something about the public area, the communal area, that I will always have part in it, even if I don't have any property that belongs to me. And the message, I believe, is very strong and deep. Um, there's in our page, in page Kaf Zayin in Bava Batra in 27, there's another very interesting remark that that Ravin is bringing from Eretz Israel, from Rabbi Yochanan when he goes to Bavel, and the quote that he has from Rabbi Yochanan is that people should take care of the boundaries of where their trees grow, and he's saying, as it was on this on this condition that Yeshua apportioned Eretz Israel to the Jewish people, that they would not particular about such matter in terms of, like, being separated in their yard. Now, the idea of what Yeshua meant, when he ordered the people of Israel certain ways of dwelling in their properties, there's a beautiful, beautiful explanation for that by Rav Dov Berkowitz in his book Daf Yomi, that he expands on each and every page of the Daf Yomi, and on the takanot, the regulations of Yoshua bin Nun, inheriting the land, with the people of Israel after they crossed the Jordan and went into the land after 40 years in the desert. And Rav Berkovich is saying the 10 conditions that the Gemara attributes to Yoshua bin Nun mainly deal with a dramatic change taking place in the lives of the people in the transition from years of being in the desert to the challenges of sovereignty, and economic survival in this country. In other words, at the desert, people of Israel did not have to think about anything in terms of ruling and having a an organized community and society. And now, when they're coming to the land, we need to rule. We need to have economic decisions. We need to have civic decisions. And there is a real fear that oppressive livelihood needs, and the building of estates, each in his family and tribe, will lead to separation between those who until now lived in one camp around God's tabernacle. We were one community surrounding the tabernacle. We were all neighbors. We were all one community entering the land, and each tribe is going to its own property, dealing with what they need in order to live. That is a danger for separation. And the Yoshua regulation state that along with the division of the land into private estates, there is an obligation to maintain the foundation of the of the basic partnership of the people in the common domain in the longed for land. And I think it's said beautifully that even though we need to take care of our private territories and properties, but if we forget that we have neighbors beyond our door, beyond the walls of our house, then we become separated, and then we are no longer taking care. We will no longer care about the partnership, about the togetherness, about the common good, about the public domain. And and I want to end with a famous midrash that appears in Vayikra Rabbah. And the midrash there is saying, Chizkiah taught, Israel are scattered sheep, and Israel is likened to sheep, just as if a sheep is struck on its head or one of its limbs, all its limbs feel it. So it is with Israel. One of them sins, and all of them feel it. And I want to take that, and we'll see the parable that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying. But if one of Am Israel is hurt, the rest of the people of Israel is hurt. If something bad happens to one of the people, and even if it's happening outside our private house, that affects us. And because we're all living in the same place, and no man is an island. And the parable that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying is this is an analogy to people who were sitting in a ship. One of them took a drill and began drilling a hole. His counterpart said to him, "What are you sitting and doing?" And he said to them, "What do you care? Am I not drilling under myself? I'm doing it in my own cell in the ship. What do you care about what I'm doing?" And they said to him, "Because the water will rise and flood the sheep we are on. Can if what you're doing in your private place can affect the rest of us. And therefore, in order to have a whole, a peaceful community, each and every one of us need not to think only about what I'm doing in my private home, but what am I doing that can harm, God forbid, the rest of the area, the public domain, the common good, which we all need to feel part of and take responsibility for, also for the outside, whether it's people or whether it's a surrounding.